Good morning. How's it going today? Good. Well, every Sunday, every time we get together for church, for our worship, there are certain things that we do together. Have you noticed that? There's certain things that we do every Sunday. And one of the things that we do whenever we get together for worship is we read and we listen to the words of the Bible. So we've already done that today, right? We've heard some Bible readings. We heard a reading from Micah and another reading from 1 Corinthians. We read together from the book of Psalms. And after the children's sermon today, we're going to hear the gospel reading. Now, the Gospels are the first 4 books of a part of the Bible we call the New Testament. And the Gospel books are Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Would you say that with me? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the 4 Gospels, and each one of the Gospels tells us the story of Jesus, each in its own special way. And today we're going to hear from the Gospel of Matthew. Have you ever noticed that there's something that we do right before the Gospel is read? Anybody know what that is? What do we do right before the Gospel is read? We sing and we stand up. Right before the Gospel is read, we sing and we stand up. Now, why do you suppose we would stand up when the Gospel is read? Well, we stand up because when we read the Gospel, it is Jesus who comes among us still and speaks to us through the words of Scripture. So we stand to greet Jesus, who comes to us in the Bible reading. How about that? So, can kids participate in what we do in worship too? Can they take part? You bet, every bit as much as adults. So when the gospel is read and we sing, all of you can stand up. And then what we do is we look to the person who's reading the gospel. Guess who that is today? Me. I'm going to be reading the gospel today. And then before I read the gospel, I'm going to say these words. The gospel according to Matthew, the 5th chapter, and you say, "Glory to you, O Lord." Can you say that? Glory to you, O Lord. And then when I finish reading, I'm going to say, the gospel of the Lord. And then everyone else says, praise to you, O Christ. Can you say that with me? Praise to you, O Christ. Isn't that something that Jesus comes among us and speaks to us still? And today, Jesus speaks words of blessing to the crowds that come to listen to him, and he speaks words of blessing to us as well. Thanks for coming up and listening. You can go back to your places, and will you please all stand as we greet Jesus, who comes to us in the gospel. Thank you so much. The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 5th chapter. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then Jesus began to speak, and he taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
And you may be seated. Well, what an auspicious Sunday this is for United Lutheran Church. We're beginning with worship. It's followed by a baked potato bar served by the youth of our congregation with the assistance of Chef Richard McGurran. And that will be followed by the annual meeting of our congregation. Apparently later on today, there's also some kind of football game going on. And let's not forget that this is also Groundhog's Day, that one day of the year where a rodent also becomes a meteorologist. In our worship today, we are continuing our journey through the season of Epiphany. And today we follow Jesus up a mountain where he is surrounded both by the crowds who are following him as well as his inner circle of disciples. And here on the mountain, Jesus shares his very first sermon, a sermon that the church has come to know as the Sermon on the Mount. And the first words out of Jesus' mouth as he preaches this Sermon on the Mountain are words of blessing. Not once, but 9 times Jesus says, "Blessed are." I think the first challenge that we have as we encounter this beautiful and mysterious sermon of Jesus is this word, blessed. What does it really mean to be blessed? I think it's a tough word to get at in the English language and in our consumer culture. We tend to think that we are blessed, or we use the word blessed when things are really going our way, when we're experiencing the best of what life has to offer us. We say that we're blessed when we've got a good job, when we've been able to purchase that home of our dreams, when we've shared a great holiday or vacation experience in the company of good friends or family. And Facebook and Instagram posts are of exciting images of adventures that people have been on and new additions to the family, and they're followed by #blessed. But what happens when you don't feel blessed by your current circumstances? What if your child has a condition that leaves the future uncertain? What if the baby you prayed for never did arrive? What if you are a parent grieving the death of your child? What if your job is hanging by one uncertain thread and you're not at all sure how you'll make the mortgage payment this month? What if you're battling health concerns that don't look like they're going to be resolved? Or the relationship that matters so much to you is so broken that you've lost hope it can be fixed? What if you don't feel like you have one true friend in this world? What happens when it seems that all of your best days are behind you now? Are you then not among the blessed? Did you just happen to draw the short stick and miss out on this whole being blessed thing? The word that Jesus uses here, translated as blessed, means to be fortunate. It's to experience fullness of life. It's being on the receiving end of God's goodness and favor. The word blessed doesn't just mean happy, at least not in the sense of being in a positive, good mood. On the mountain, Jesus says without reservation, "You are blessed." And then he does something that completely turns all of our expectations about blessing upside down. Jesus calls blessed those people whose lives would never end up in a #blessed post. Jesus pronounces blessing on the most unlikely of this world, the poor in spirit, those who are grieving, the meek and the merciful, those who are being persecuted for their faith. Where's the good life in any of that? What in the world is Jesus doing here? Well, first of all, this is not the whole blessings in disguise thing. People who are grieving don't need to be told how blessed they are because they had this wonderful person in their life once. They know that. And grief is still awful. People who are poor don't need to be told that poverty will teach them something or help them rely on God. It may, but poverty is still frightening and dehumanizing. People who are lonely don't need to be told, well, God is your friend. They may indeed experience God's presence and company, but not having someone who shows up in the flesh for you in this world is a feeling of being alone and vulnerable. Jesus is not saying here to the people he names, hey, your circumstances might stink now, but find the blessing in them. There's a silver lining after all. Instead, Jesus is proclaiming here that there is more going on than meets the eye. Your current suffering or circumstances do not tell the whole truth. Jesus' words here are revealing a truth that present circumstances cannot show us. Jesus wants us to recognize that those that we don't often see as valuable are precisely those that God chooses to bless and honor and love. God's special favor is for the least and the last and the lost of this world. God's blessings are for the ones who feel certain that God has forgotten them or they've been left out of God's goodness and providing. Jesus' words of blessing here are pronouncement, and they create what they proclaim. You matter to God. Jesus' words of blessing are words of hope and promise that the way things are now is not the way they will always be. Blessedness is God's gift. It is God's reign breaking in here and now for everyone and not just a privileged few. And this truth, it transforms the present moment. God's future is already rolling toward us, and there is peace and purpose and abundance of life as we live into God's good favor and regard for us all. I think that sometimes the words of the Beatitudes are so familiar to us that they've lost some of their power to really shake us up and to reorient our faith and the world as we experience it. Pastor Nadia Bowles-Weber, a Lutheran pastor and an author, offers an interpretation of the Beatitudes that conveys the power that Jesus' words here have to surprise us and to reorient our faith and our lives. And here is some of Pastor Nadia's version of the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who doubt, who aren't so sure that they know everything. Blessed are those who feel they have nothing to offer. Blessed are they for whom nothing seems to be working. Blessed are they for whom death is not an abstraction. Blessed are they who have buried their loved ones, who have loved enough to know what loss feels like. Blessed are they who don't have the luxury of taking things for granted anymore. Blessed are they who can't fall apart because they have to keep it together for everyone else. Blessed are those who aren't over it yet. Blessed are those no one else notices. The kids who sit alone at middle school lunch tables, the laundry guy at the hospital, the sex workers and the night shift sweepers. Blessed are the forgotten, blessed are the closeted, Blessed are the unemployed, the unimpressive, and the underrepresented. Blessed are the wrongly accused, the ones who never catch a break, the ones for whom life is hard, for they are the very ones whom Jesus chose to surround himself with. Blessed are those without documentation. Blessed are foster kids and every other kid who just wants a place to feel safe and loved. Blessed are the burnt-out social workers and the overworked teachers and the pro bono case takers. Blessed are the kids who step between the bullies and the picked on. Blessed are the ones who have received such real grace that they are no longer in the business of deciding who is deserving. Blessed is everyone who has ever forgiven me when I didn't deserve it. Blessed are the merciful, for they totally get it. I don't think we can listen to Jesus' words of blessing today without also hearing them as a call to action. We're called to live into these blessings and to bless the very people Jesus blesses. And do you know what? I see all of you doing that already. I see you walking into the painful and holy ground of grief to surround grieving people, not simply with cliches, but with food and listening ears, and when needed, financial support. I see you quilting blankets in our fellowship hall so that people who are graduating and welcoming babies, or people whose homes have been destroyed by fire or war, might know the blessing of warmth and comfort. I see you showing up on our church lawn or at the mission or at La Grave on First, preparing meals you would serve to your very own families and sharing them generously with people who thought there was no blessing for them. I think that too often the church has become known for the people it judges and excludes and condemns. But what if instead we followed Jesus' lead today? What if, like Jesus, the first words out of our mouth as a body of believer were words of blessing for this world? What if our first and highest goal was to bless others with the gospel, with this good news that they are deeply loved by the God of all creation, that Jesus suffered and died so that their sins might be forgiven, and that there is nothing at all, not even death, that has the power to separate us from the love of God. Today is the annual meeting of the congregation, and we'll elect some new people. We'll most likely fuss a bit about the numbers in the budget. We will look over some reports. But what if we also resolved again and to do anew this year like we have never done before, that we would set out to bless one another and this world God so loves, to bless one another by being to one another a community of grace and forgiveness and healing, to bless this world by reaching out and sharing the good news that God is with us and for us, and to do that with our words as well as our actions. This Jesus that we follow, he cried at the tomb of his friend. He turned the other cheek and he forgave those who put him on the cross. He welcomed people who thought they had been left out of God's reign of blessing. Jesus, who died and rose, is God's great beatitude for us all. Jesus is God's greatest blessing, a blessing that creates a new reality, a new way to live in this world, and a promised future with hope. My friends in Christ, today, may you know yourself to be blessed by Jesus. May you see with new eyes the very ones Jesus calls blessed today. And may we, you and I, be God's blessing to one another and to this world. Amen.